Hey everyone, now that you've begun your research, it's time to start thinking about citing our sources. Now, the word cite, C-I-T-E, means to give credit to someone. So we give credit to others, first of all, to avoid plagiarism, because we're using other people's words and ideas. They don't belong to us, so we need to give them credit because they wrote it and they came up with the idea. The second reason we cite sources is to build credibility. Within your speech, when you are citing a source, that shows that you have done your research, that you are knowledgeable about the topic, and that builds up that ethos. When we are using a speech with outside sources, there are 3 different types of citation. You'll have to do all 3. 2 of them are written, and 1 of them is verbal. So 2 will be done before you deliver your speech, and 1 will be done as you deliver your speech. First is called parenthetical citation, also sometimes called in-text citation. You've seen these before. It's called parenthetical because it comes in parentheses within your text. It will be within your outline when you're using outside sources. So if you are using a direct quote, stating a fact, paraphrasing, or telling a story that's not yours, then you need to be sure that you have parenthetical citation, whether you are using a direct quote or not. If it's not a direct quote, you may be using someone else's idea and you still need to give them credit. Secondly, your works cited page. This should be 1 page that follows your outline attached on the same document, and it should be a full list of your references in MLA format. Finally, you'll use verbal citation when you are delivering your speech, and that cues your audience to help them understand where you got your information and who wrote your information and what their credentials are, so we trust you more as a speaker. We'll start with parenthetical citation. This is the first type of written citation, and hopefully this one looks familiar, as you should be using it in your literature classes, as well as maybe your writing courses as well. So direct quotations, it's important to note, are word for word the same as the source. If you just highlight some text and copy and paste, that is a direct quotation. Perfectly fine to use that in a speech. You just need to cite it. So you should use an in-text citation. We are using MLA, or Modern Language Association format, for English, and that requires the author's last name and the page number. Now, I'm assuming many of your sources you'll find online, so they might not have a page number. That's okay. That's why I said if available. Here's an example of a direct quote. You notice if it ends with a period, the period goes here at the end. If your direct quote ends with an exclamation point or a question mark, then it goes inside of the quotation marks and you include a period at the end. For most sentences that end with a period, omit right here, add it at the end. Here's my author's last name and the page I found the source on. You will have page numbers for some articles, especially PDF downloads, so be sure that you are utilizing page numbers as often as you can. Here's a second example. This one is an article I found online, perhaps only 1 page long, so I'll just omit the page number, but I still have my author's last name, punctuation at the end of my direct quote. If you have a quotation from a group or a corporate author, let's say Yale University publishes a study, then you can just cite Yale University. Pretty rare that they wouldn't give their researchers, but it happens on occasion, so that's fine. And if I have a text that doesn't have an author at all, perhaps some Psychology Today articles don't have an author, you would just then use the title of the article in quotation marks and be sure that you are utilizing proper capitalization of those proper nouns, the title is a proper noun. So you need to capitalize any word that is not a small article, like the word of is an article. And again, punctuation at the end. Those are all for direct quotations. If you are paraphrasing, that means you're putting the ideas into your own words. You also still need a citation to give reference to your author. So here's an example of a direct quote from the book The Great Gatsby, and you can see in my paraphrase, I've shortened it, and I've put it in my own words. I still have the exact same citation at the end, so I'm still giving credit. I still have the page numbers I am talking about, but I put it in my own words. I strongly encourage you to paraphrase your research as often as possible. When you plug your outline in to Turnitin, you should be thinking about that similarity chart or similarity check. Your speech probably shouldn't turn up as 0% similar, but it also shouldn't be any more than, say, 30% would be a good percent. Think about that as ownership of your speech. If you have 30% similarity, that means you own and you wrote 70% of your speech. Okay, that's pretty good. If you have 50% similarity, that means you only wrote or you only own 50% of your speech. So as often as you can, try to paraphrase instead of using direct quotes. Now, that being said, sometimes a speaker or a writer has such great word choice or use of language that it's important to use the direct quote. That's okay. Just don't go overboard with it. Okay, citation type number 2 is our works cited page. This is also written and will be done before you deliver your speech. This is a list of your references. It's a list of the sources that you used so that someone could look at your works cited page and go back and find your resources. In terms of formatting, it should be on a brand new page. The title works cited is centered. It's not bolded or underlined or italicized at the top of the page. You shouldn't have space in between your individual citations, but the entire page itself is double spaced. Sometimes formatting is hard to understand if you're not looking at an example, so please reference the example that I have on Schoology. Entries should be listed alphabetically by the author's last name. If you have a source that doesn't have an author, perhaps it only has an article title, then that article title serves as the author, so alphabetized by that. Entries that are more than one line should be indented on any subsequent lines. The first line is justified all the way to the left. Second, third, fourth lines should be indented once. So it's the opposite of a paragraph. Usually we indent the first line and the other lines are not indented. I'll show you an example of that. Here's an example of citing an article on a website. So I've got my author's last name and first name, the title of the article. Sorry about that, this should be italicized. The title of the website, the publisher and publishing date, if accessible. Sometimes there's no publisher, sometimes it's the same as the title of the website. Medium of publication would be web, and the date of access. If you need more MLA tips, and I believe there's actually another update on MLA since this one, visit Purdue OWL, visit their website for MLA. Anytime you have a citation question, I always direct students there. When you're formatting titles, both in your outline and in your works cited page, remember that longer works like books or entire websites with multiple pages, as well as films, are italicized, and then shorter works like articles or web pages or an episode of a television show, those would be shorter works, so they are in quotation marks. All right, the last type of citation, we've got our in-text or parenthetical citations within the outline. We have our works cited page, which follows the outline. And then during your speech, you'll utilize verbal citation because your audience won't be following along with your outline. So they need to know where you're getting this information from. Many different ways to cite a source verbally. You can say the author's name. You can say the author's credentials. Credentials mean why we would trust this person to be an expert. You could tell us the date that the work was published. You could tell us the title of the work, and you could tell us the publisher. I wouldn't recommend doing all 5 of these, but for the informative speech, you need to use at least 3 of those 5 items in each verbal citation that you do. Here's some examples of verbal citation. Verbal citation can sound a little clunky the first time you try it because there's so much information to cram into one sentence. So please do practice so that you don't sound awkward stumbling over all the information you need to include. Let's look at this first example. According to Jimmy John, a professor at Sandwich University, in his article entitled All 9 Grains, sourdough makes for the best turkey sandwiches. You can see my author's name is Jimmy John. The second piece of information I've provided are his credentials. He's a professor at this university, Sandwich University, and he wrote an article, and here's the title of the article, All 9 Grains. So I used 3 pieces of information: author, credentials, title. Look at the second example. In her 2014 autobiography published by Random House entitled Yes Please, Amy Poehler explores various childcare options for the rich and famous. Now this one I actually used 4 pieces of information. I used the date of publication, 2014. I used the publisher, Random House, the title of the work, Yes Please, and the author, Amy Poehler. Try to mix up that information. That will also help it sound not as redundant. If you use the exact same format for every single verbal citation, that's another reason that often sounds clunky when speakers are delivering their verbal citations. But it should be fairly obvious that you have at least 3 of those 5. And again, I'm not looking for all 5. I think it might sound a little awkward if you try to cram all 5 pieces of information into your citation. 3 is just fine. That's all you'll need to know for citation for this speech. Your 2 written forms of citation are parenthetical and your works cited page. Please consult Purdue OWL for the most up-to-date version of those, and you can also see my examples that I have posted on Schoology. Both of those should be done before you turn in your outline, because they need to be in your outline and at the end of your outline. And then the 3rd type of citation is your verbal citation. Remember, you need 3 out of these 5 items, and try to mix up the order that you put them in and practice verbally so that you don't sound clunky trying to stumble over all of this information. Now that you have your parenthetical citation, your works cited page, and your verbal citation, you'll be ready to give credit to your outside sources, so you ensure that you're not plagiarizing, and you give credit to yourself as a speaker because it proves that you've done research and you are an expert on your topic.